Hello, my name is Kay Meyer. I'm a reader and writer of all things spooky, and today I wanted to share what I read for the I Love Black Horror Readathon, because it was great. First of all, this is a readathon organized by Kelssweetie. I put her info down below. Definitely go check her out. She's got a YouTube and an Instagram. Love her stuff. So the main point of this readathon is to just read horror books by Black authors, which isn't that hard to do. There's a lot of really good ones out there. This was my first time doing this readathon. I had a lot of fun with it. I'm excited to do it again next year, and I found some authors that I'm definitely going to read more from. So like I said, the main objective is to just read horror books by Black authors. However, there is the added challenge / fun part of having weekly themes. So if you wanted to have some guidance of what to choose, you could look to Kelssweetie's posts for some inspiration and some book recommendations by her and a bunch of other creators that collabed. Kind of guide you if you didn't know where to start, and also kind of open up your mind to what horror is, specifically Black horror. I tried to hit all these. I did kind of mess up on the last one. So the first theme was speculative fiction. I would say a lot of what I read ends up being speculative fiction because I like a lot of sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. But until this book, I'd never read anything specifically because it was speculative. Weird Black Girls by Elwin Cotman was a good place to start because this is a collection of short stories all by Elwin Cotman. I had no idea who he was before this. I had this book on my TBR from I don't even know when or recommended by who, but it was available at the library, so I snatched it up. I will say I had different expectations than what this book ended up being, and that was on me. So I assumed I was going to get some kind of like weird girl lit by a Black author. But the title, Weird Black Girls, only refers to one of the short stories, and so not all of the stories even featured Black girls as the main characters. So I tend to prefer anthologies that are themes, so I kind of just assumed that the title was going to be like indicative of a theme, but I was wrong. So I don't mean that as like a diss to this book or that author. That was just purely on me for not looking into it more. I liked how each story was a different blend of sci-fi, fantasy, or horror, and kind of magical realism at times as well. We have a more fantasy one where a suit of armor comes to life and joins a LARPing tournament kind of thing. And then the first story, I would say, leans more horror because there's a tree that is convincing the parents to punish their kids in increasingly horrifying ways. There were some that incorporated like time travel and body sharing, sort of, instead of body swapping. That was one that I really liked. Each of the stories within this collection kind of played out those three genres in different ways, and it was just fun to read something different. The second theme was afrofuturism. For this week, I read Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. I can't tell you how many times I have seen this book recommended, so this was already on my list to read at some point in my life, but I'm really glad that I got to it now. Part of the thing with this book is it was written in the 90s, but it takes place in 2024 through 2027. So obviously we've lived through part of that already, and I had heard other people say it was scary and eerie how much the book was kind of a premonition for what 2024 and on has been like in real life. And after reading it, yeah, it was definitely giving the vibe of that guy who wrote that book, The Titan, about that ship that sunk before the Titanic happened. Yeah, Parable of the Sower was kind of giving that. But it was still so good, even though I'd heard a lot of people talk about it already. I didn't know what it was going to be about at all, which shows how much I paid attention, I guess. So I read a reprint that included a foreword by LeVar Burton, and I really liked hearing his perspective on the story and just kind of learning more and actually paying attention this time. how influential Octavia Butler's writings have been, especially this book. So Peril the Sower features Lauren, who is kind of living in a time where all the adults around her don't want to accept the inevitable. And it reminded me of The Walking Dead in a way where I think The Walking Dead draws things from this, obviously, because the Parable of the Sower came first. But just imagine a city that's walled off, kind of like Alexandria in The Walking Dead or Lauren's neighborhood. It's walled off. Other people can't really get in. They are very selective who and when goes out, just because all the resources are very scarce, like food, water, everything is very hard to come by. People are out in the streets doing whatever they can to survive. And obviously, that doesn't bode well for the main character. And eventually, those walls come down, and Lauren's life has changed forever. But she was prepared for something like this to happen because she was very forward thinking and knew that they couldn't live like that forever. She goes on kind of a cross-country journey to find someplace better to live, forms basically a found family, and goes through a lot of shit. Let me just say that. And part of what kept her going is Earthseed. And that's kind of like a religion she's inventing for herself and eventually shares with others and grows into a sort of community. Now, if somebody had told me this book was about a teenage girl inventing her own religion in an almost post-apocalyptic America, I would have picked it up a hell of a lot sooner. Because it was great. That sounded amazing, and it was. I do want to get to the sequel soon, though. Week 3's theme was thriller, and I like thrillers. I think it's very easy for them to be cheesy, though, and predictable, or kind of problematic. So I was kind of like, I had to look at recommendations because I really had none. And I'm so glad I picked up what I did because it's so different from anything I've read recently, and I just had a great time reading it. I listened to the audiobook for Futility by Nuzo Onoh. She is a Nigerian British author, and when I saw that people call her the queen of African horror, I was like, hell yeah, I gotta read her stuff. This is like a horror thriller, and there's a heavy dose of comedy as well. There are multiple main characters, and part of the fun of this book is seeing how they're all connected and how their strings are being pulled by the same entity, which I wasn't expecting that was going to be part of it, but it was. There's also a lot of mention of food, including I would say, this is kind of hard to describe, but I would say trigger warning for cannibalism. Some of it is deliberate, and some of it is more metaphorical, like spiritual. Like you're consuming the bodies of others, but you don't know that you are, / you're not eating them, but they're becoming a part of you, or a part of Chia, the main character. Yeah, that's a weird tag. I don't know how else to describe that. But Chia runs a popular soup restaurant, and everybody's coming for her soup. Everybody's coming for her soup, and everyone's loving it. Everyone's paying for her soup. She's making so much money for her soup. And it has a secret ingredient. And then there's Claire, who's really, really annoying and a racist white British lady, and I really didn't like her point of view. Everybody in this book is unlikable in some way. Even Chia, who ended up being my favorite, loved that girl, even though she was problematic herself as well. But this is kind of one of those reads that you're just like, none of these people are entirely likable, and it's fun to see some of them come to their demise. And then the last weekly theme was Southern Gothic. This is the one that I kind of messed up on. I got a regular Gothic, so England. not Southern. But it's still gothic, and it's still by a Black author, and I still really liked it. But I do want to read Black Southern Gothic horror in the future, even though I didn't get to it this month. So the book I ended up reading is called Midnight Rooms by Donyae. I think that's how you say her name. I'm not sure. This book was great. It's so creepy and dreamy, and there's just a certain quality of like the imagery and everything, and like the dread factor, that if this was back in 2016, I would have made a hell of a Polyvore collection about this book. I don't know if y'all remember Polyvore, but it was a website where you could take pictures and kind of make collages. That it definitely wasn't supposed to be used that way, but that's how I used it, and a lot of people did. So yeah, it definitely made me want to go do that again, which is impossible because that website doesn't exist anymore. But anyway, I really liked the main character, and just from the get-go, I was just so intrigued by like her voice. She kind of gets married and is sent off to a crumbling estate, which is so gothic just by itself. I would love to see an adaptation of this that's reminiscent of Crimson Peak by Guillermo del Toro. Like, that's like the visual kind of vibes this has. I guess to try to like explain it further would just be very dreamy and kind of fairy tale, but also has this sickening sweet awfulness that you're not quite expecting, but just when you see something absolutely stunning, you're horrified by something about it at the same time. This book kept me guessing as well. At one point I was kind of like, are these all going to be rat people? What is going on with this family? Are they all there all the time? What do you mean they know about her fairy houses? Are they living in those? Like, do they shrink? Do they live in the forest? Are they in the walls? Like, I really did not know what was going on, but in the best way. Like, I just kept reading and was so engrossed in what was going on, and there was a little bit of repetitiveness, but that just added to the effect of like, this is a dream-like world. Something's wrong, but she can't quite figure out what it is yet. And then when I did figure it out along with her, I was shocked. And also just, it was so good. I had so much fun with this. I would love to read another book by her as well. I don't know if she has any other books, but I would love to read those as well. Just based on this one. It was absolutely amazing. And without saying what the actual ending is, I will just say that I am still thinking about it. Like, this ending is haunting me. Because it's just one of those that it's like, oh yeah, you have everything figured out. And then like, oh, but do you? And now I'm going to think about it for a long time. So yeah, that's kind of all I read for the I Love Black Horror Readathon. I would love to do this again in the future. Obviously, I'm going to keep reading Black authors and Black horror past this point. That's not something that's going to stop after this like readathon. Just like how the next readathon I'm doing after this is for trans rights. I want to keep diversifying my TBR shelf, the shelf of books I own, as well as like what I'm reading from the library and everything like that. Like, I don't want to just read books from the same kind of people all the time, because that's boring and that gets old. And yeah, I'm just trying to read a little more widely. I was so excited to read stuff that was viewing horror as more expansive as well. And yeah, I had a lot of fun.